from your local news leader, Taylor Mitchell, Mitchell Life, and Central Illinois' most accurate forecast with meteorologist Jacob Dickey. You're watching The Morning Show at 9 on WCIA 3.
Welcome back to The Morning Show, and it's Monday, so of course we have another Wise Guys segment. Joining us is Paul Kwiat. Paul, what are we talking about today?
Hi. So last time I was here, we were talking about whistles and how they worked and about sound, and I thought we'd just kind of continue that a little bit because there's still a couple other fun demos to show. So if we just go to the first graphic, so sound is just a wave, not surprisingly, a wave, and if we look in time, the distance between the two peaks of that wave, that's called the period, and you take 1 over that, that gives you the frequency, and that's what we think of as the pitch. So for example, if I have something like a middle C on a musical scale, that'll be the thing that's oscillating 262 times a second. The bigger the oscillations, the louder the sound would be. If we just go to the next slide. So what's actually going on in the case of air is that we have pressure fluctuations or density fluctuations in the air. And kind of pictured here is what it looks like as a function of distance. And so the distance between like the high pressure regions is called the nearby high pressure region is called the wavelength. The speed of the wave you get just by taking the wavelength times the frequency. So for example, with something like sound, that would be 340 meters a second, which comes out to about 1 mile every 4.7 seconds. I'm sure you've heard if you see a lightning flash and you want to know how far away it is, you should count the number of seconds. If it's about 5 seconds, then it's about a mile. And then lastly, here we can see that the frequency, if we just rearrange this a little bit, is given by the speed. The frequency, which is the pitch that we hear, is given by the speed divided by the wavelength. So if we go to the next slide, if I have a wave going through free space, it can have any wavelength, it can have any frequency. But if instead that sound is confined in some way, like on a guitar string or something like that, only certain wavelengths will sort of fit in that structure. They'll only be resonant, and that's going to confine what wavelengths and therefore what frequencies. So if we come back to us, I have some very simple demos of this. Some of you maybe seen this before. So I just have some tubes of different lengths here, and I'm just going to hit these against the table. This is the long tube. This is the shorter tube, and that's the shortest tube. And you can see, obviously, that
obviously higher tone.
Exactly, the frequency is going up because the length is going down. In fact, we looked at that last time. I had this whistle, and I said I could get the pitch by saying how long does it take to get from the sound to go from one end to the other end and back, and that's basically the period of that. I can demonstrate that that makes a clear difference just by changing that distance. Okay, so as I make the distance shorter, the sound comes back quicker. Yeah. But there's another way that we could do that. Instead of causing it to go a different length to come back, I could say, can I change how long it takes by having it go faster? Okay, so if we go to the next slide, the speed of sound, not surprisingly, is related to the average speed of the molecules in the air, because those are the things that are moving. And we can get that average speed from this one equation that I have here, which says the kinetic energy, which is just 1/2 the mass of whatever one of the molecules is times its velocity squared, is proportional to the temperature in Kelvin. And the bottom equation there got kind of screwed up, but basically, actually it looks not too bad. So the velocity is going to go like 1 over the square root of the mass. And again, the velocity and the frequency are proportional. So the frequency is going to go like 1 over the square root of the mass. So if I now go to the next slide, if we look at something like air, typically the air we're breathing is mostly nitrogen, and nitrogen N2, the molecule, and each nitrogen atom has 7 protons, 7 neutrons. There's 2 atoms in a molecule, so it's got a total of 28 of these main mass units. If I compare that to something like helium, helium only has 2 protons and 2 neutrons, so it only has a 4 mass. So if you want to know the relative frequency that you would hear in helium with respect to nitrogen, you take the square root of the inverse ratio of those masses. So the ratio of 28 to 4 is only 7. You take the square root of that, and that will give us 2.65 as the ratio of the frequencies. Okay, so coming back to us here, so you guys already know what's going to happen.
So I'm kind of curious of where this kind of experiment ties into the balloons there.
These are balloons that are both filled with helium. Okay, and now that I've got helium in my lungs, now the speed is a lot faster, and therefore the pitch, the frequency is also going to be a lot less.
Yeah.
course, that's already kind of left me, and so now
It really leaves, you know, quickly.
comes pretty
that's for sure.
quickly,
Yeah.
because I didn't say it, my lungs also helium's light, so it will just come out. Wanted to get some sulfur hexafluoride for this, which is then that's super heavy. It's much heavier. It's 146 times heavier. But anyway, hard to get that, and also quite dangerous because if you inhale it, it doesn't come out because it'll just sit in your lungs because it's so heavy. So anyway, that sounds kind of spooky. If people Google people breathing sulfur hexafluoride, it's kind of a fun Halloween thing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Paul. Appreciate it.
No problem. Nice to see you.
Taylor, back to you.